Welcome to the Happy Mindset, episode 128. Today's episode is called Kaizen. So today I'm going to talk about this Japanese concept, Kaizen. It's used a lot, I think, in the business world. Toyota will be an example of a company that uses this philosophy, I guess, as well you could call it. It's a focus on continuous improvement. So that's basically the essence of Kaizen. I think it's a Japanese word as well, Sino-Japanese word. But it's the basis of it is on continuous improvement. I like this idea because it focuses on the process itself. You're making small refinements over time based on real world feedback. So you're just making small adjustments over time. And that's a long-term approach to things. What I want to talk about on the episode today is tying this even to productivity. And how I guess I struggle with this and how I implement it, how I experiment with this. So in the domain of productivity, I'm somebody who likes reading about things, reading about ways to improve my productivity. I like to be productive, to create things, to even with this podcast, building consistency. Like I've been doing weekly episodes now for a good probably 2 years now, I'd say. I think I missed one episode. I think I missed 1 week last year. Then I'd have 6 episodes some months as well. So I've been continuously productive with this, and it's been a focus on continuously improving this. Small minor tweaks and adjustments that I make. One thing there that I become conscious over time of things that I want to improve on. One of the things I wanted to improve on there recently was to stop saying like as much. I started to realize how much I say like from looking at my podcast. It's something that I would have never noticed in my day-to-day, how much I was saying that. It was just from listening to my podcast, I was getting kind of irritated by that, and I just wanted to stop doing that. I've done small little refinements like that over time that add a bit more to the quality, in my opinion. It adds to the quality in how I'm delivering the information. So with the productivity, one of the biggest obstacles that I see with productivity is that you can get into this mindset of always reaching for things, always wanting to make things better. So I guess this is the nuance here, is that as you move forward, you want to make things better, but you don't want to be constantly caught in that trap either of never being happy with where you are right now. So that's something that I've struggled with, that I'm continuing to be aware of as well as I move forward, because there's no end point here. And if you're going to be constantly living with this feeling of this needs to be better, it's not a great place to be. On a feeling level, I think you want to be more in a place of being grateful with where you are right now compared to where you were, and coming from the mindset that there's still opportunities to grow here, there's still opportunities to improve this. So it's more of a mindset of evolution, of growth, rather than a mindset of perfection. I think that's the distinction I want to make here, because you'll see people who are very perfectionist in their tendencies, and I can see this in people because I've had that in the past myself, and I struggle with that as well moving forward. That's something that I'm aware of that's within me. And you'll see it in people, they'll have nervous tics or this nervous kind of energy. It's like an energy of wanting to control every single minute detail, which can lead to great results, but at the sacrifice of your own well-being, your own mental health. Because I've been in that state of being before where I didn't know I was in it, but looking back in it, I can see that I was trying to control every little single thing in the creative process so that it turns out exactly how I want it. But even when things were going my way, it's a horrible experience. It's not a great experience long term. Maybe you can do it for the short term, but long term, I think it pays a massive toll on your mental health and well-being. Because I guess when I was living in more that mindset, I was looking at binary. I thought that you could either be in that mindset and be always on the ball, on edge all the time, or you could either be on the other opposite of more of a laissez-faire, of let the chips fall where they may. I'm not too bothered, doesn't matter. So I've been on both ends really on the spectrum, I think. I don't know how far on either end I went. But I can remember living with a mindset and a way of looking at the world where I really needed to control it. I really needed to make things happen. I thought that's what making things happen was all about, controlling the conditions, controlling the environment and creating it that way. And then I was also on the other end where for a long part of my life I was just way too laissez-faire. I was going with the flow, but I wasn't intentionally creating the flow in my life. So that's the distinction that can be helpful, is that what I'm merging here is an attitude of letting the chips fall where they may, going with the flow, but you're intentionally creating the flow, and you're doing that through subtle minor things, these shifts in your focus. It's a relaxed focus. I've done an episode on this before about relaxed focus. There's a big difference between very, very intense and more relaxed and open and receptive. If you even think about it, if you've got a very, very intense and focused mind, there's a time and a place for this, but generally if you're very intense, very focused, you're not going to be very receptive to anything new then. And as a creative person, you need also to be receptive to new things. Otherwise, it's going to be the same thing every day. Same, just like I suppose you're just polishing off the same thing. It's nothing new, nothing creative. So with the Kaizen approach, I think that's a philosophy that needs to be there, because otherwise there won't be a movement in a direction. Because with the Kaizen approach, you are forcing yourself to narrow it down to a few small things that you want to improve in it that will enhance the quality. So you're paying attention to the things that are working. So I'll pay attention to podcasters. I'll pay attention on the level of what are they doing? What are they even not saying? Like, what's the thing about them that's different? Like, why am I drawn to this? And reflecting on that, and I might come to mind as one or two things, like their energy. And even with their energy, you can dial it into, like, what type of person are they? Are they a jovial person? Are they a more serious person? Dial into that. Pick out the things that you like about it. Because if you like it in that person, you probably would like to have that in yourself as well. And that's something that you can intentionally do as well. If you want to be a bit more lighthearted. That's been a struggle for me sometimes, because I saw myself for a long time as a very serious person at some stage as well. I think I've gone through so many different stages where I've seen myself a certain way, and then I'll move on and I'll see myself another way. And I don't know, it's a strange one when you don't intentionally put time into reflecting on this, because a lot of this will come from the feedback of the people you're around, and that will also change from the feedback of the people you're around. So in one scenario, you could be around people where they might categorize you as you're shy or you're a very serious person, because it's all relative. You could be a very serious person in one environment. In an environment of comedians, you could be a very serious person, or over here in an environment of maybe professors, you could be a more lighthearted person. So it gives you it's good to put these things into perspective, because then what this does is that when you see things you like in your environment, you can see that you can bring out that aspect within yourself a bit more as well over time. It's not like you're going to change this immediately. It's not going to be like you pick out a characteristic in somebody. You go, I like that about that person, so I'm going to immediately put it into my podcast, because it won't be natural, because you're going to try and imitate them. It won't be you. What you want to do is pick out the things, the characteristics, the traits within them, and then translate that over time. Give yourself the freedom and room to be that trait. See how that manifests in your own experience. So I'll just talk a little bit about writing, how this has been playing out recently with writing. So with writing a bit more on Medium, like I've said in a few podcasts already. And what I've done is that I have invested a bit of time, money, energy into learning some techniques when it comes to writing, learning the skill of writing, so that I'm able to get across my message more clearly, more concisely, more to the point, and speak directly to the reader. It's really important as a writer to be speaking directly to the reader. So at the same time, I invested in a course. I've been following this writer, somebody I like there, for quite a while, on and off. I've been reading his articles. I just wanted a course, so I invested in a course. And what I have found from doing that, there's a bit of course fatigue that sets in as well after a while. I've found I've done so many courses over the years, so many different formats, so much of the same thing as well, but in a good way. There's a general process as well to all these things that I've been in, whether it be writing or programming or coaching or whatever. They might look different on the surface, but there are underlying stuff that's very similar. And you get to a stage where you're thinking that I'm getting a bit fatigued of this because I know this stuff and yet nothing's really changing in my life. So there can be a level of that, and I faced that with this course as well. This course is a good course, and I like the guy. Like I said, there's nothing wrong with it. I know I'll use it as a resource moving forward as well. But what I found is that I was just a bit fatigued and drained, and I reached a stage where in my mind I was thinking that I've got a base here where I've got some techniques I can use, because I didn't know anything really about writing techniques before this. So I've got some techniques, but I'm going to combine this with art. I'm going to combine this with myself, with self-expression. So when I was in Galway for a few days, it's actually a big thing for me. I went to Galway on my own for a few days on a holiday, on a break. I'd recommend doing that. It can be very uncomfortable the first time you go anywhere on your own. But really question, why do you feel uncomfortable about that? Just think, like, just allow that to be there. Like, if it's something you actually want to do, some people don't want to do this. They're not the type of person who would like to do that. I've always wanted to do things like go on holidays by myself. The only thing that was stopping me is that it sounds a bit weird to other people. That was the biggest block I had. But when you do it, then you grow from that experience. So that's why I'm saying I'd recommend that. If you're listening to this, there's a good chance that you would be inclined to want to do that if you're not already doing that. Because you do need a bit of, like I've mentioned a lot of episodes already, self-isolation is a good thing when it's imposed, when you do it for yourself. Because you really it's about getting comfortable with yourself. The more you can get comfortable with yourself, the more you can express yourself. The more you express yourself in a more genuine and authentic way, the more you're going to have genuine and authentic relationships in your life. And that's what you want at the end of the day. That's what I want anyway. But, so with the writing, when I was in Galway, come back to this point, I bought a number of books, a lot of interesting books. One was from Ken Robinson about creativity. One was about don't read the news. A lot of great lessons in that book. And another one was Don't Move My Cheese. That's a good book, very short book. I read it in like an hour or so. Like it's a very short book, about 80 pages long. Profound lessons, and there's a parable there. It's a parable. And then the other book I got was The Artist's Way. And The Artist's Way was something that really resonated with me. Starting doing morning pages, that's one of the things that it recommends in it. It's a 12-week course. It's actually a course. I didn't realize it was a course until I bought the book. And somebody mentioned that before, The Artist's Way, so I said I'd give it a go. What it's got me to do is morning pages. So this ties into the productivity as well. What I have found is that I haven't stuck to one productivity thing ever, I don't think. Other than the core of creating podcasts and writing and coding, I've just experimented with a lot of stuff. I'm trying to explain this now. Like morning pages, for example, there is you do 3 pages, write out everything that comes to mind, no filter, anything, could be nonsense, gibberish, anything. Don't judge yourself, just put it out there. For me, that's a way of meditation. So meditation there, I would say that I'm somebody who meditates quite a lot. I don't always have a practice. I don't always sit down and meditate. But what I'll do is that for every now and again, I will consciously just look out the window, or I'll just pay attention. That for me is meditation. Pay attention. Pay attention to what's going on for maybe 2 or 3 minutes. That's meditation. Morning pages there is a meditation. You're paying attention to stuff. You're writing out all the stuff, all the gunk in your brain. It's a meditative process. So in that regard, when I was always looking for these productivity tips and hacks, because productivity is often comes down to having a clear mind, and then that will lead you to meditation and other things like that, because you realize that that has a huge effect on your creativity, because on your productivity and creativity, what you're realizing you're doing is that you're dumping all the shit out of your brain, and you don't realize how much shit is in your brain until you start doing this. Even that book, Don't Read the News, that will show you how much shit is in our brain that is not relevant, that's not helping us. One question he asked in that book was, there's two questions. It's like, does the news help you to understand the world better? And have you been able to make better decisions with your life as a result of reading and listening to the news? There are two questions to just reflect on. I'm not saying whether there's any answer to that, just reflect on those questions, take an honest look at it, and then decide what is a natural rhythm and fit for you. When it comes to reading books like that, I just experiment with them in my life. Naturally, over the last few years anyway, I've been paying less and less attention to the news. I'll read headlines, I'll read the bare minimum to have me informed about the world, but my biggest shift is that I don't emotionally invest in the news like I used to. I used to get triggered by the news a lot. I used to emotionally invest in it to the extent that that became how I viewed the world. I had a very distorted perception of the world, that it was a lot more dangerous and a lot more... it just felt like I always had to be afraid. In the background of my mind, it's a subconscious thing. This is why it's so insidious. It's because it's attacking your subconscious mind with fear, and you don't realize that on the conscious level until you start doing these more conscious activities and you start feeling better about yourself, you start feeling better about the world, and you start having the time and space to actually create stuff in your life. My podcast, my book, none of this would come from a very fearful mind that hasn't got space for freedom and creativity and connecting with people, even trying to connect with people. If I'm filling myself with stuff that's making me fear-based, why would I want to genuinely connect with somebody? Because I'm terrified of the whole thing. So these are all subconscious things. As an adult, conscious mind, we think that sounds trivial, but it's not. It plays a huge role in the tangible stuff, the tangible output in your life. But the artist's way anyway, that's me combining more of just an artist's expression. When I'm looking at that too, you're paying attention to your inner world, your inner artist, so you're releasing this stuff, you're creating from that place rather than without this understanding. If you're just focused on productivity hacks and you're focused on anything but the inner world, what will tend to happen is there'll be a lot of stress and tension in your mind and your body, because you're always looking for reality, feedback, things outside you to validate what you're doing. And that's a very, very stressful experience, and that will lead you into the perfectionist mindset that I mentioned at the very start of this podcast. But what I'm doing is combining that, balancing that out with an inner world, an inner artist, that all you have to do there is pay attention, tune in with yourself, attune with yourself. A large part of my life too, I wasn't even attuned to myself. So then how could I be attuned to other people if I wasn't even attuned to myself? So this dials it all back again. It's finding the balance then. So the Kaizen then becomes a bit more normal and natural. It's like something that organically evolves. It just gives you eyes for it, that it's a continuous improvement process. And yeah, that's mainly it. That's mainly what I wanted to cover today. Kaizen, and just bringing a bit more of the inner world to it, a bit more feeling, a bit more creativity, and combining that with some productivity, continuous improvement, and just realizing that this is a balancing act. I struggle with this a lot. I'd like if there was more of a flow to this. The fact of the matter, there isn't, but by knowing these different things, it does help a lot, because when you're just stuck in one track, you're just like that. You're like that record player, like scratching the surface and it's making awful sounds and stuff. But when you're not on that just single track, when you're open to different frequencies, different connections, that it becomes a bit more experimental and enjoyable. I'm going to do an episode as well on one of the things I picked up on Ken Robinson's creativity book. It's a great question. How are you intelligent? It's a great question to ask yourself, especially when you read the book and you see the many forms of intelligence, because we're so conditioned to look at intelligence through analytical process, numerical ability, and language ability. we don't think much beyond those types of things because that's the way the education system looks at intelligence. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that question because I think that's a very vital, fundamental question that can open up a lot of doors in your mind as well. So that's it. Thanks again for listening, and I will speak to you on the next episode.